now I'm being recorded. There we go. I want to do a little bit of work with the on the market, just to talk a little bit about the market conditions. So let's start with my trusty page that I put out. This goes out on the Facebook page every Tuesday morning, and it's been very consistent. I've been doing this for, I think, about 15 weeks now, and the message is still very consistent across all of Southwest Florida, Collier and Lee. You take a look at the number of new listings and the number of price drops. 1,389 by my calculations is just about double the number of sold listings and the number of pending listings. So we are continuing to put more inventory, more available inventory back into the market in the form of new listings and price drops than we are taken out of the market. So as you would imagine, the month supply is going up. It's still a seller's market by all measurements, but it's much better, probably a little more than double the amount of inventory we had 6 months ago. So clearly there's more options for buyers. Obviously, the doubling of the interest rates is kind of a downer on buyers wanting to buy when they finally have an opportunity to buy. But certainly you can remind your buyers that 8 or 9% is the average over the last 30 years. So we're still well below the average. I see that the rates creeped up a little bit over 6 with the latest increase by the Fed. So make sure you have your buyer in constant touch with their selected mortgage lender so they can figure out what's going on in the market, and so you can figure out how to help them figure out what the monthly payment is. Because as we've discovered over the years, people don't live in the $475,000 that they're paying for a home. They live in the monthly payment. Want to know how much it's going to cost every month? Mortgage, taxes, insurance, mortgage and insurance premium if they're putting down less than 20%. All added together, what is my monthly cost of operating doesn't usually include utilities, things like that are paid for separately, but you want to know what kind of monthly payment you're looking at, and you can certainly help your buyer by adding in the cost of insurance, the cost of possible cost of electricity, if you can get that from the agent that's representing the home. But you want to come up with some type of a total cost of ownership so that there's no surprises when you submit a contract. And as we've talked in the past, there's, our affiliate mortgage company has a great little app called TA Access One, which you can get you can load it down on your Windows computer, you can load it on your phone, but it's a great little tool to put the basic characteristics of the home in there, and it will give your buyer a nice printout of what their monthly payment looks like and also how much they have to bring to close. So that's the market. Again, it is a shifting market. It has shifted in many ways to much more inventory, more choices. And we don't want to call it declining prices. I think we would be better off just calling it moderation of the rate of increase that we've seen in the last couple of years. So some of the price drops will show you that people have overshot the moon for their neighborhood and their current inventory situation, and so they're having to adjust downward their listing price. But again, the sky is not falling. The market is a little bit healthier for a number of reasons, and prices are coming down a little bit. So to your sellers who say, well, I wish I had sold 6 months ago, obviously if they're going to sell and buy something, they're not going to pay for their new residence what they would have paid 6 months ago. So the market that you sell in is the market that you buy in. And make sure that the seller understands, as far as their motivation goes, that they're probably going to get a little better deal on the other end, even though they're not going to get what they thought they could get 6 months ago out of their home. So I've had I try to be available for you to discuss any aspects of the contract or what's going on in the market. I've had a few people ask a little bit about what happens if my seller's not on the market yet, but they want to buy something else. They found their dream property. For those of you that have been with us for a little while, we did sign up for a program called Knock. There's a couple of products out there, but basically Knock allows the buyer to buy and then up to 6 months for them to sell their home. So if you have a buyer that's got a property that they'd love to have, but they haven't sold their home yet, you can certainly get with a Market Center as a member of Knock, and you can certainly get Knock certified. Don't knock it until you've looked into it. It's a pretty good program for people, because when it's private capital, when they go to apply for the mortgage for their new home, the mortgage is done by removing all the costs of their current mortgage, so that they can get the debt to income ratios that look like what will happen when they don't have that home anymore. So if that's something that your buyers are interested in, we can certainly provide them more information. There's a great website for you to look at. And a few people have expressed some interest in that. So please reach out if you'd like to know more. All right, so much for the market. Again, pretty consistent pattern over the last 3 or 4 months. All right, are there any questions or comments? What do you see going on in the market now? And is there anything that you've seen that you want to share with a group? No, don't everybody talk at once. I know, Kristen, you've been out there and done a few deals. Brian, anybody want to comment to see what their experience is in the market recently?
I'm having a lot of buyers just saying they just want to wait. They want to wait and see what happens. They're still going to wait. They're waiting to see what happens. More waiting.
There's a cost to waiting, and that's one of the things that you can do. I know for those of you that have an hour on Friday afternoon, Denny Grimes has a wonderful script and role play call where they deal with current scripts, just like what Kristen has brought up. Obviously, there's a cost of waiting, and if they're currently renting, clearly the pain point is, okay, so let's say we wait another 6 months, and you're betting on the fact that the market will be much lower in 6 months than it is today. There are no economists, including national, local economists, that are predicting major changes in the prices. They are predicting a lower rate of increase. So, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, how much are you paying for rent every month? Oh, $2,600. So in 6 months, that's another $14,000 out of your pocket. And that's kind of the down payment you were looking at making on a new place. So try to establish the cost of waiting, because I don't think that waiting for the market to drop is a prudent strategy. There's no data out there and no economist predicting that even if we go into a mild recession, or those that think we're in one now, that certainly is not going to change the fact that if they're renting, that money's gone. Whereas if they're buying, that money is going to work for them and building equity and building long-term wealth. There's a very good email that I distributed to a few people from a few months ago. I probably won't be able to find it today, but I'll put it out on the Facebook page. Basically, it was a mortgage person that said, okay, here's the here's how much you're forfeiting by not buying today. And they using current mortgage rates and everything, and over a 5-year period, 10-year period, it's a lot of money. So maybe you can use that argument to convince buyers that they should at least go out there, look, see what's out there, and see what the cost of ownership is. Great point, Kristen. Thank you.
Welcome.
Anybody else? Brian, what are you seeing out there?
Well, similar to what Kristen was just saying, it seems like there's a big waiting game going on right now. So and I agree, on the Fridays when I can, I jump on Denny's role play, and it's fabulous. I would encourage everybody to get in on that and do that, because he does answer those current, these current conditions. He's putting together scripts or just conversations, how to properly respond to those. And it's great stuff.
And I think they're recorded. I think there's a YouTube channel that Denny has that has recorded. So if you don't have time to go live on, you can certainly go on Denny's YouTube channel. I'm pretty sure every one of you gets an email every week from him about signing up for his class.
Yeah.
And there's always a link to the YouTube. So
and you know what, Jeff, there's nothing like doing a script or role play and then going back and watching yourself of all the little things, because I touch my face, I'm doing all this crazy stuff while I'm trying to, because you're nervous talking in front of other people. So you can go back and evaluate yourself too. And I think it's great.
Yeah, they put me on the spot one day.
I know, I saw that. You did very well, sir.
I didn't go back and look at it because I wasn't interested, but I did crash and burn, so that was good.
No, sir, you did well. Thank you.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about today's topic. This article was generated by, let me see if I can share this somehow. Share screen. There we go. I'll be glad to put this up on the Facebook page. By the way, if I tried to get to all of you with the matrix, but if I missed you, you can still email me, jonesnaples@kw, and I did put it out on the on our Naples Facebook page. So either way, it's in the files library of our Facebook page, so you can get it there. Holly Harmon is a terrific local attorney who has been working with us for years as the scribe. When we do our contract review for Naples contract, we do it every 2 years, and we evaluate every suggestion that was made, regardless of whether scrap the Navor contract, go to FARBAR. Whatever comments are brought in, we read every one of them and we analyze them to see if our contract could be made better. And Holly's the one that takes the suggestions and puts them into the legal drafting process so the contracts make sense. She's a wonderful attorney. She wrote this article probably a couple years ago, but the concepts in here are very valid. I'm going to go over many of the points today, but please feel free to read that article because she's been an excellent local real estate attorney for many years. So that's out there for you. So if I work through her suggestions here a little bit, I guess we can just kind of stick with her article there a little bit to get started. I'll put that back up. There we go. Okay, so obviously her first suggestion, read the contract. Okay, so what we do every Monday for an hour and a half is we talk about various aspects of the contract. And one of the things that she sees when realtors call her is the idea of reading through the contract and knowing what's in the contract and actually going over it with your customer. So one of the first things that I'll shift to here is a great document that I don't see very often in any of the compliance files, but there's a timeline of events that's available to you in the contract library. And, you know, you look at this document, go, well, it's pretty busy. Yeah, it's pretty busy. But if you fill this out at the start of, when the contract is consummated, ready to go, you'll have a timeline that you can share with your customer, B being the buyer, L being the listing agent, listing licensee, S being the seller. So you can go through the contract and put a timeline of events in there so that you don't miss anything. I don't do much business. I occasionally will help a friend or a friend of a friend. And I'm working with a couple that's moving into Naples from Montana. And we put a contract together. And the first thing I did when the contract was inked was I filled this out. And I put all the dates in there and I sent it to them. I said, so, you know, make sure you understand all of your responsibilities where it says B, and make sure you understand if that applies to your situation. I put a date in there or a note. So always recommend you use this document or some facsimile thereof where all of the dates that are critical dates in the contract. And we're speaking today of the NABOR contract where the only time of the essence date is the closing date, but you still have to watch your timetables and you don't want to get out of bounds of these timetables. And especially when it comes to the second deposit, if there is one, especially when it comes to applying to the association for membership. These are all things that are very important to get done. Then, of course, you have your inspection timetables. And what I see happening in a lot of contracts these days is the sellers are cutting the inspection time down, which defaults to 15 days. They're cutting it to 10, 7. Now, it takes a little while to get an inspector out there, and it usually takes a day to get the report back. So if you're on a 10-day time period, you've got to hustle. You got to make sure it's not difficult to get an inspector out there within a few days. There's lots of inspectors and lots of choices, but you got to get the report back. And remember, you know, in the standard NABOR contract, you have 15 days to inspect. If that gets cut to 10, you have 10. And then you have 5 days after that to send the request to the seller, the buyer's request and seller's response. Seller has 10 days to respond. So you got to keep those dates in mind and keep in mind the expectations are that everybody's going to follow these dates. If you're on an as-is contract, again, in the as-is contract, there is no guarantee for any repairs, any price reductions, any credits. But I would say the majority of people that write a as-is contract expect the fact that if the inspector comes back and points out some defective items, that the buyer will request the seller to repair them or give them a credit. All right, well, assuming you want to do that and you have a 10-day inspection period, you've got to do your inspection. You've got to write an amendment to the contract. You got to send it to the seller. The seller has to sign it prior to the end of your due diligence period. The seller doesn't sign it prior to the end of your due diligence period, and your buyer is expecting those repairs to be made, you're going to come to a decision point. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we've sent over a request for the seller to repair the air conditioner, and the seller, we don't have a response back. And I've sent several requests to the listing agent to see if the seller was going to respond. No answer. So by the end of my 10th day, I need to either agree that that's probably not going to happen and move on, or I need to cancel. So remember, in the as-is contract, there is no 5 days to ask the seller for repairs. There's no defective versus cosmetic. There's no orderly process for repairs. And remember, unless you send over an amendment saying that the repair should be made by a licensed contractor and receipts provided or whatever, that there's no governance for repairs in the as-is contract. You send over and say, I'd like the air conditioner to be repaired or serviced. There's no governance that has to be a licensed technician. So, you can easily judge, if you're on this call enough, that broker Jeff's not a huge fan of as-is contracts because they leave a lot of details, but make sure, we'll talk about it in a minute, additional clauses. Make sure if you're using an as-is contract that you have the proper language in there to protect the buyer from open expired permits, municipal liens, and code violations. All right, so we'll jump off of here. Did I have that timetable up so everybody could see? Yes? Somebody tell me.
Yes.
Yes.
Got it.
Sorry, I was on mute.
So
Yeah,
it was
me
up
too.
it was up while I was talking. Okay. I sometimes get my shares all messed up here. Okay, so we'll leave this up for a couple more minutes because I don't think I had it up while I was talking. But again, this is a great document. It's in the library. You can prepare it and share it with your buyer or seller so that they know what's happening. And you want to calendar these dates, maybe calendar them a couple of days ahead of time so that you can remind your buyer or seller that something has got to happen. And again, this is written for a normal neighbor contract where you have the inspection timetables in here and have the buyer's notice of inspection items, seller's response, buyer's right to terminate. All that's built into the standard contract, but it's nowhere to be found in the as is. So make sure if you're not on an as is contract that you do not use these lines and you do not send over the buyer's request and seller's response document, because in an as is contract, it doesn't mean anything. So, and the biggest situation I see is when you're on an as is contract, you want to ask the seller for a credit or repairs, and you have to make sure that that's sent to that seller and returned by the end of your due diligence period. Okay. We can stop that share. So Holly's point is read the contract, know the contract, be able to explain it to your customer. Always share the contract as soon as possible into the relationship, okay? If you're working with a buyer, chances are they're not going to make a decision in 5 minutes. They're going to want to look at some places. And in the meantime, I would share a copy of the contract with them, and I wouldn't try to go over the whole thing at once, but I would share the contract with them and say, we're going to talk a little bit about this as we, do our showings, as we meet afterwards. So you have an idea when you say, I would like to make an offer, that a lot of the things that are in the contract, and you'll be able to answer questions that I have for you. So read the contract, know the contract, use the timeline of events, and remember that all dates in the contract are calendar days, except if they end on a weekend or a holiday. The other thing to remember is the effective date is day zero. The effective date is day zero. The effective date is day zero. The first thing I hear whenever somebody says, well, I think my due diligence period is up on Wednesday. I say, well, did you count from day zero? No, I count from day one. Well, then it's up on Thursday. So make sure you say the date, the last date where there's a meeting of the minds, the contract's effective. The effective date is 0. The next day is day one. So the obvious example is if we sign the contract on Wednesday, that's the effective date, and the first deposit's due in 3 days. When is the deposit due? The answer is Monday. Day 0 is Wednesday. Day 1 is Thursday. Day 2 is Friday. Day 3 is Saturday. Oops, it's a weekend or holiday. So Monday is the day that it's due. So, and it's calendar days, not business days. The only time business days come into effect is if you're working with a homeowner document review or a condo document review. Those statutes both use business days. So for example, if you're going to give your customer the condo docs, the date of delivery to the customer is day 0. So if you give it to them on a Friday, that's day 0. Day 1 is Saturday. It's not a business day. So 3 business days would be Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. So your customer has 5 days to do their 3-day due diligence. If that's something that you feel like they want to really dig into the docs and ask questions, that's and delivery of the documents to you, the agent, does not count as delivery to the customer. In FAR it does, so be careful with that. So if the agent sends you the documents on Wednesday afternoon, and that's not delivery to your customer. Your customer may get them on Thursday or Friday. I recommend Friday because then they have a little extra time to peruse the documents and make their final decision. Okay. Moving on to point 2 in Holly's comment there. Avoid drafting your own contract clauses and use pre-printed addenda whenever possible. Okay, so Broker Jeff Maylock's moments are when I see a contract and I see some eloquent writing that makes very little sense, and I ask, who wrote that? Oh, the other agent wrote that. Really? So you have to be very careful not to cross the line of practicing law without a license. It's a code of ethics violation, and it can get your real estate license revoked about as quickly as anything I know. If a complaint is filed against you and you have drafted language that's not legally sufficient and it's created a dispute in the contract, you will hear from the FREC, and if you don't have a good answer, the FREC may suspend you or revoke your license. So please don't play in these. Everybody wants to become a lawyer on Saturday afternoon when they're putting the contract together. That's why Broker Jeff is available to you on the days that end in Y. Please don't do that. If you've got a complicated situation or you've got something that the buyer or seller really wants in the contract, and you don't have a clause for it or an addendum for it, let me know. We have a number of clauses that are available for various situations that I've gotten by asking attorneys to give me the wording. Therefore, I don't have to worry that I'm practicing law without a license. There are a zillion addendums and amendments to the NABOR contract that deal with all kinds of different topics. We can probably go and look at those. Let's see. NABOR up here. Let's do this. Very. Okay, so this is the NABOR. Sorry about that. Get on there. we go. So this is, if you go to nabor.com and you look up the list of contracts, the forms are always here for you to use, all right? And let's just take a look real quick here. Everybody can see this okay? Yes?
Yes.
Is it large enough? You want it larger?
It's fine for me.
It's good.
Okay. So let's take a look at the number of addendums to the lease, to the sales contract that are available for you that are already written and already there. There's addendums and there's amendments that cover a great deal of territory so that you don't have to write anything up. It's there for you. There's some multiple, let's see. There's some of these addendum that cover multiple situations so that you can use an addendum to extend a closing date or change something in the contract, which covers multiple situations. Let's see what we got here. Appraisal, contingency, backup contract, cooperative, defective drywall. Housing. And an addendum, remember, is done with the contract. An amendment comes after you've consummated the contract, but you want to make changes. So this is a pretty good one right here. And you'll notice that it covers a lot of territory, right? You can change the price. You can extend. This is actually to the listing contract. We can go back. You go back to closing date change, contract extensions, pre-closing occupancy, blank amendment, assignment. There's all kinds of documents that are available in the library. If they're not in the DocuSign or .loop library, they're in nabor.com that you can use to express yourself without having to make up language, okay? So rule number one is make sure you stay in your lane. You're not an attorney. Even if your buyer or seller says, well, just put it in this way. You have to be careful that you're not altering a legal document. That's our charter as real estate agents, is to be able to complete a pre-approved and legally sufficient contract and fill in the areas that we can fill in. We are not assigned to make modifications. So again, if you have a situation that's not, you don't feel is covered by the contract, call broker Jeff. Let's talk about it. Let's make sure we're on the right track as to what we can put in there. There are a number of addendums that you can use. There are a number of situations that you can make sure that you are specific enough. And you will remember that when we talk about the NABOR contract, we talk a lot about the inventory situation here. Remember, we've gone to great lengths, including this year, adding electric vehicle charging equipment. So constantly updating these lines as to what's real property and personal property. And they're there to make sure that what the buyer is expecting to convey at closing and what the seller is expecting to leave in their home is there. And that can be audited during the walkthrough. Also remember, broker Jeff, famous expression that in tennis, love means nothing. And in real estate, furnished, turnkey, as per MLS, partially furnished, none of those words are binding in the contract language, because without a detailed inventory list, they cannot be verified, and therefore they're not binding. So we had a seller the other day that said the contract said turnkey. When I did my walkthrough, not everything that I remember from the showing was there. Okay, did you have an inventory that buyer and seller signed off on? Well, no, I expected it to be there. Well, so sorry, so sad, but there was not an agreement, a meeting of the minds in the sales contract that buyer and seller agreed that in detail, these are the things that are going to be there above and beyond what's in the contract document. So a personal property inventory to be taken, there's an addendum that says we're going to take a personal property inventory within 3 days of the contract, and we're going to sign off on it. So always, if there's more than what's on this list, if it's turnkey, if it's furnished, partially furnished, make sure we have a separate inventory. And also know that if there's financing involved, this process has to go on in parallel to the contract, because lenders don't fancy furniture and personal property above and beyond the basic appliances, window treatments, so forth and so on. They don't fancy that as part of their loan. They're not loaning money on a couch or a barbecue grill. They're loaning money on real property. So even if you put in there that these items are being left for the convenience of the seller and have no value, a lender will most likely object to that. And please don't just say, well, I won't send that page to the lender, because that could be considered a form of mortgage fraud. So try to keep it simple. If there's no mortgage involved, it's a cash contract, just add language in there that an inventory to be agreed upon by the buyer and seller within 3 days of the contract. Anything like that, there is an addendum that is worded exactly that way that you can include, that requires that the buyer and seller agree on an inventory within so many days of the effective date of the contract. And if not, the buyer can cancel. So be careful with that. If you have specific language, like what do we put into an as-is contract that binds the seller to address open permits, expired permits, that language is not in the as-is contract. Those situations are usually discovered after the contract is consummated and goes to the title company. They haven't completed their municipal lien search before you finish your due diligence, then an open or expired permit is not the responsibility of the seller to close unless you include language to do that. And I have that language, and you're welcome to get it. Whether I can find it real quick or not, let's see. There we go. Okay, so in a NABOR or FARBAR as-is contract, if you put the following language in, property is to be conveyed without any open or expired permits, municipal liens, or code violations prior to closing. You put that language into the other terms and conditions of your as-is contract, then you're protecting your buyer from these situations not being discovered during the due diligence period, which may be short, it may be 10 days or 7 days, not enough time to complete a municipal lien search. You really want this language in there. So I certainly can probably take it and put it in the chat somehow, so you could copy it. There you go. It's in the chat. You can copy it and keep it for your reference, but there's a number of other clauses that have to do with waiving appraisal contingencies and things like that, that I've gotten from attorneys that can, we can give you that language and you can save yourself a possible problem for your seller down the road. Let's see what else she says in here. Okay, we covered that. Okay, so the chat was sent to everyone. Anyone having trouble with it?
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, I don't see it
Anywhere.
in the chat, Jeff.
Well, maybe I didn't send it.
There it is.
Hey, listen, you got to keep broker Jeff in tow here. I just forgot to hit the enter key. You should be able to copy it now. Any as-is contract you write, you can put that in. That's a legally sufficient clause that can go in your as-is contract. You got nothing else out of today's class. You got that. That'll protect a buyer from inheriting permits that are not properly closed out. Also, if your inspector finds an unpermitted structure, that's another issue that you need to deal with. So, all right. Well, thank you for reminding me to hit the enter key. I'm much appreciated there. So, a couple of other things that she mentions in this article. We talked about personal property addendums. We talked about making sure that in the inventory section, both real property and personal property, that you have everything in there that you want, or refer to a separate list to be agreed upon. I see TVs is an issue, it have been an issue because the TV is held on by a bracket, and the bracket is the fixture, but the TV is not. So be careful with things like that. Make sure, as a trusted advisor to your customer, that you ensure that when you do that walkthrough inspection, that what the buyer's expecting to be there is there. Because if you want to start drama, when they walk in and they see that what was a 75-inch beautiful LED TV, all there is a bracket hanging there, you could be headed to Best Buy. You don't want to do that. So make sure you and your buyer are on the same page of exactly what's going to be there when you do your walkthrough inspection. That's your last chance to make sure that everything's there. And if it's not there, it's your last chance to request that the seller bring it back or provide you with a credit. So did have a situation not too long ago where it was a turnkey furnished. There was no inventory taken. The buyer noticed that there were a few things missing from what his recollection was. And the agent said, well, if you want, we can make a list of those items and we can either have the buyer bring them back or we can get a credit. And the seller said, I don't worry about it. It's fine. It's not anything major. and then came back to us as the realtor and broker and said, hey, when I finally moved in, a lot of the things that were supposed to be there weren't there, and I had to go out and pay for them. What are you going to do about it? The answer is, at the walkthrough inspection, the buyer has the right, if they have documentation, the buyer has the right to ask the seller to either bring those items back or give them a credit. And they have that right as a buyer, especially if there's a list or if it's contained in the wording in the contract. The buyer has the right to say, I want that, and either bring it back or give me a credit at closing. I had a lady take the pool fence one day, the little glass or thing that goes around the pool to keep people from running into the pool inadvertently. She took the fence. The fence is mentioned as one of the items in the personal property section. And we had to convince her lawyer to tell her she had to bring the fence back because the fence was custom made for the pool. That's your protection. That's what it's there for. Make sure you use it. Okay, don't forget the Homars Association Disclosure Summary. All right, well, let's talk about that. In the statute for the HOA statute, there's a HOA statute and a condo statute. In the HOA statute, the language says that if the HOA disclosure summary is not presented timely with the contract, then the buyer has the right to trigger an automatic 3-day right of review of the HOA docs. So there's an addendum to the contract allowing the buyer to request a review of the docs. But if that isn't there, but the listing agent did not provide an up-to-date HOA disclosure with the association spelled properly, the amounts, quarterly or monthly fees are not in there correctly, the buyer can cancel at any time. So make sure you have a current HOA disclosure as a listing agent. Make sure that you verified the name of the association and the amounts that are mentioned in the document. And please don't write additional things in like transfer fee of $1,500, food minimum of $500. Those don't belong in that document. The only thing that belongs on that document is the monthly or quarterly HOA payment and or a separate recreation fee paid to, let's say, a master association. So that document has to be provided at the same time the contract's being ratified, or the buyer has what I call a get out of jail free card that says, you didn't provide it for me, you didn't send it to me, maybe never sent it to me, or sent it to me a week or 10 days later. That's a trigger for the buyer who says, I'm really not sure about this place. And you have absolute leverage under the HOA law statute to ask the seller for all the documents, and you have a 3-day right of rescission, and you can invoke that at any time. You can invoke it on the closing date if you decide you don't want to close. So be careful with that. If you're the listing agent, it's imperative that you provide it. It's a great idea to upload it with your MLS listing so it's there. But it's also imperative that you have the seller provide you with the current bill, or that you contact the association and make sure that you have the current information. A lot of people like to copy it from another listing in that neighborhood. And if the other listing's wrong, then you've copied wrong information. I did have a contract that many times HOAs will be built in different sections as the developer builds the project out. So he can have Misty Creek 1, Misty Creek 2, Misty Creek 3, Misty Creek 4 as each section of the project is developed. And then lo and behold, after the developer turns it over to the ownership of the members of the HOA, they may have an attorney consolidate them into Misty Creek HOA. So this was a case where the agent had the name of the association as Misty Creek 9. And Misty Creek 9 had been consolidated into Misty Creek Homeowners Association. And the buyer discovered that the property was a relatively low elevation from sea level, which is all of our area, and decided he didn't want to live there. Took it to the attorney. The attorney said, well, the association name is not spelled correctly. You're out. So we lost a $900,000 contract over the spelling of the HOA. So be careful. It's a dirty detail that has to be taken care of by the listing agent. If you're the buyer's agent and you want to make sure the contract stays together, make sure that if the listing agent hasn't provided it, you have your buyer sign it and ship it over with the contract so that all of the information is current and correct and the contract stays together. All right, so the next major area of the contract is the financing contingency. So let's jump out of here and jump into the contract. And again, we'll work on NABOR today. We can certainly talk a little bit about FARBAR. Excuse me 1 minute. But in the NABOR contract, the financing contingency is something that we've gone over many times, but we're going to go over it again today. As apologize for those I've been recently on a call and we've done this, but it's always a great idea to have this fully understood. Obviously, if it's a cash deal, the buyer can still obtain a mortgage, but they cannot do so with any of the protection of the financing contingency. So if they're not able to close on the closing date because they haven't got their loan yet, their deposit could very well be at risk. They cannot claim any of the portions of the financing contingency to help them out. All right, so let's look at this clause. First of all, always select the type of mortgage that the buyer is applying for. And if it's VA or FHA, there's an addendum that we ask that all parties sign, including the listing and selling agent, that have to do with the provisions in the VA and FHA contract. There is some seller responsibilities, mainly in the FHA. There's a built-in appraisal contingency that allows the buyer to cancel, even though they may be well qualified for the loan. If it doesn't appraise, the buyer can cancel. So the seller is going to be asked to sign a document with the mortgage lender certifying that it's an FHA loan and they're agreeing to all of the terms of the loan, which include the appraisal contingency. So what I'm seeing now on line 61 is in the NABOR contract, there's no default. If you leave that blank, that means that, let's say that the buyer's credit isn't quite as good as they thought once it goes into underwriting, and they may have been approved for a 5 3/4% 30-year mortgage, but all of a sudden the lender finds a couple of hiccups in their underwriting, and now they say, well, I'm sorry, we're not able to loan you the money at 5 3/4. It will be 6 7/8. So the buyer who is expecting 5 3/4 calls you up and says, oh man, my lender is not going to loan me the money. They want an extra 1.25, and I don't want to pay that much. Can the buyer get out if you leave that blank? What's your guess? Would that be a big fat no?
Yes. Can't get out.
Yes, no, yes.
Yes,
The-
no, yes.
You've forfeited an element of protection for your buyer because you haven't put a cap on the rate. If you put 6 there and the buyer is only able to get a loan at 6 7/8, the buyer can say, too bad, so sad, give me my money back, I'm gonna move on. And that's protection for the buyer. We talked about putting a default in similar to FAR, which says it defaults to the current market rate for that particular buyer and their credit history. We decided against that because we don't know what that means. It's the same when I see people put PREV into that slot for prevailing. I don't know what the prevailing rate is. There's a number of factors, especially with the market being somewhat unstable in terms of the inflation, and what the Fed's doing to try to stop inflation is having a long-term negative effect on mortgage rates. So you might apply and put 6 in there and find out there isn't any 6. You've protected your buyer from having to pay more than they want to. So another thing that you will find, you take enough contract classes from Broker Jeff, is that Broker Jeff is not a fan of blanks. If I see a blank, then I'm not sure whether on line 65, if you left it blank, whether you meant 45 days after the effective date, or whether you didn't discuss it with your buyer and put the date in there that you felt was sufficient to be able to find out if you're going to have time to get your mortgage approval in that time. So please don't leave things blank. Even if it's a 30-year mortgage and it's 5 days after the effective date, put the 30 and 5 in there. Doesn't hurt, but it makes sure that you didn't forget it as you were drifting along, putting out your preparing your contract. So that brings us to line 65, which is probably, I would guess, one of the most misunderstood parts of the financing contingency, and probably one of the most important parts. So that period, the financing contingency is granted to the buyer up into and including closing, if that date extends on or near the closing date. If you're the listing agent, I strongly suggest you don't let that happen. You know, you don't want the buyer to be able to ask for their money back on the financing contingency 2 days before closing, because they put a contingency date in there 2 days before closing. That's not fair to the seller. So I would make sure that I understood what that date is, and that there's enough difference between the financing contingency date and the closing date to allow the seller to move out, get things organized. And I would want to make sure that it's at least a couple of weeks before closing. If you're working for the buyer, then you want to talk to the lender and say, okay, Mr. Lender, when do you think we can have loan approval? And if the lender says, well, I think we can have it in 30 days, and you want to put 33 or 35 days in there, and the closings at 45 or 50 days, fine. That date is the date upon which the buyer must decide that they want to waive their financing contingency, perfect the contract, and also waive their right to ask for the deposit back. For many years, when we had quite a bit more inventory, financial advisors were coaching their customers not to ever waive the financing contingency. And because there were a lot of fish in the sea, sellers were reluctant to exercise their right to terminate the contract when the buyer didn't waive. A little different environment today. It softened a little bit, but we did have some contracts that were canceled by the seller because the buyer didn't waive their contingency by the contingency date. So make sure you take some time on that date. Make sure you check with the buyer's lender as to what they think they can do in terms of approval. And make sure the buyer understands that they've got to make a decision to waive the contingency and have their deposit go firm if they want to move forward and solidify the contract. Otherwise, if they don't do it by that date, they run the risk that the seller could terminate and the buyer would get their money back, but they wouldn't get the home. So most buyers, when they get to that point, they want the home. They've already started investing in it. Maybe they bought some furniture, but they're surely planning what they're going to do when they get there. And if for some reason that abruptly terminated because we didn't waive the financing contingency, then that's a sad thing. It probably won't help your relationship with the buyer at all. So calendar that date, put a date in there that gives plenty of time for loan approval, but not any time for the seller to go ahead and move out. There you go. The last part of the financing contingency that's quite misunderstood is in big black bold letters here. And I've had agents, where the loan was not approved, and the closing was probably not going to occur for a few days after the closing date, to say, oh, well, I got 10 days. And that would be no. Read the words with me. If buyer waives this contingency and is unable to close on the closing date due to a delay solely caused by the creditor lender. Okay, so that's a mouthful. The buyer must have waived the contingency, and the buyer must have had a clear to close, but the lender can't deliver the packet by the closing date. So therefore they cannot close. In that particular case, you must notify the listing side, the seller, in writing that you are exercising your right under the provision in the contract from 72 to 75, that you are extending the closing up to 10 days. You have a clear to close. The lender just can't deliver the package, and therefore you're exercising your right to extend the contract. Yet it's not automatic. It doesn't happen unless the buyers waive the contingency and you've notified the other side of the situation. Be careful with that. I've had a lot of agents say, oh, don't worry, I got 10 days. I don't have anything to worry about. Yeah, you have to worry about the buyer being in default because they don't close on the closing date. The lender can't have the package there, and they haven't negotiated an extension to the closing date or waive their contingency and notified the seller. Any questions or comments on that?
Nope.
I know that I spend a lot of time on this, but it's one of the most critical parts of the contract, and more buyers that are using financing are able to get contracts through because there's more and more supply out there. So, and even though we still, in our world, cash is king, we still have 65 to 70% of the contracts closing in cash, but still there's more and more financing contracts, financing deals getting through. So the next part of our letter on the bulletproof contract is the good faith and diligent clause. So parties have agreed to deal in good faith with respect to all provisions of this contract, and the financing contingency, which we just talked about, requires the buyer to make continuing good faith and diligent effort for the loan. D2B in the Inspection paragraph, seller shall make a diligent effort to perform and complete all remedial action prior to the closing date. So the good faith is kind of woven through the contract. And if the party's not acting in good faith, I can think of a situation where the buyer went to contract with a pre-approval letter from lender A and didn't make a good faith effort to work with lender A because they were concerned about some things in the condo that a tenant informed them of. So they kind of hemmed and hawed around and then decided they didn't want to move forward with the contract. They didn't make a good faith effort to apply for the mortgage. They had another lender send a cryptic, sorry, these buyers are not approved because of their debt to income ratio. So we're out. In the NABOR contract, a declination letter has to be a uniform commercial credit form. It's an official federal form that's signed by an officer of the bank saying we can't make the loan. An email coming from someone in the bank saying, sorry, this can't be done, is not sufficient to cancel a NABOR contract under financing contingency. So be careful with that. If the buyer decide, if the lender says I can't do it, make sure they provide the form that's mentioned in the financing contingency paragraph in exact language. Where we are here. You can see an equal opportunity Credit Opportunity Act statement of adverse credit action issued by the creditor lender confirming that the mortgage financing on the terms set forth in this contract was denied on the property was unacceptable to the creditor lender or the buyer financially failed to qualify for terms. Those are the general way that a buyer can cancel a contract using the financing contingency. So we go down to parking spaces. Again, parking spaces, storage units, all those happy things need to be delineated. Oh, stop share. Let me share again. Okay. They all need to be delineated here on 24 to 26. Okay, if there are numbers assigned, it's not parking spaces 2, it's parking spaces A101 and A103, or whatever is assigned to that particular. Sometimes you'll get a parking space assigned right up close to the front door, and you'll get another one, for a second vehicle that's not quite so close. So make sure those numbers are there. That ensures that they will be assigned to that buyer. The classic case is the high-rise stack where you have the sellers have they were early buyers, they have the space right next to the elevator. So when they park their car there, they can just open up, carry things in or whatever and go right to the elevator. And they run into, and you put a 2 in there where it says parking spaces. That makes sense. So all of a sudden the sellers are approached by some other owners there. Their place is over against the wall, a couple 100 feet away or 100 feet away. And they say, hey, I hear you're selling. Would you mind swapping parking spaces? And the seller says, no sweat to me. I'll go down to the office and we'll have them change it. Sure enough, if you put a 2 in there, your buyers are stuck. They're going to be parking over against the other wall, and they're not going to be particularly happy with you as an agent because you didn't protect them. Same for garage spaces, cabanas, storage lockers, boat docks, slip numbers. Those aren't specific in there. You could create a problem for your buyer not to get the correct spot assigned to them. There we go. All right. So attorney review is a right in many states, especially I think New York and New Jersey. They rely on the fact that everybody signs the contract, but it goes to an attorney to review. And if the attorney finds something in there that they don't like, then the buyer or seller is able to cancel. Now, there are addenda for the sales contract that do provide for a X period of time for attorney review for the buyer or the seller, and if there's a concern on the part of your customer that they want to have their attorney look at it, put that addendum in there. It's easier to put that in there than not to put it in there and then find out that there's something in the contract that wasn't properly delineated in the eyes of their attorney. So again, just attorney review can be used. It's required in many states, so don't be surprised if your customer is coming from another state and is used to it. Use only independently verified and documented information on the contract. Okay, so if you are putting information in from the MLS, and we look at the bottom of every MLS printout and it says that the data is supplied and believed to be reliable, but must be independently verified by the buyer. So on the bottom of every MLS printout, it's part of the contract that says, if you don't know, don't put information in the contract that could be damaging to either side. So if it's not independently verified, an example might be, I look at the MLS listing for a couple of other properties in there and see that the fee is $1,200 per quarter, and you put it in there into your HOA disclosure and find out that it was just raised last month to $1,400. You got an unreliable document there that could cause the contract to fail. Always make sure that the information you're putting in there is obtained from reliable, independent sources. There we go. All right, so that's an article. It's a reminder of, items that you should check. I always tried when I wrote a contract to write the contract and then go back through it backwards so that I wasn't pulled in by a line or whatever, but I went through it backwards just to make sure that I gotten everything. And sure enough, you'll find out, oh, I missed that one. Oh, I didn't put something in here. And this way you can catch yourself from sending over a contract with something missing in it. So it's just, when you go through it backwards, you're not focusing on, your eyes aren't focusing on your choices you made. You're looking for choices that you didn't make or something that you meant to put in but didn't. All right. So that takes us through Holly's article. I think that anybody can write a solid contract, but if you have a question, you're welcome to message me in any way, and I'll try to help you with anything that you're not clear about with the contract. It's a good idea to know, if you're writing a FAR contract, that all dates are time of the essence. In the NABOR contract, the only time of the essence date is the closing date. So it's a good idea to understand the dates. It's a great idea to use that timeline of events to make sure that nothing is being missed and no date is being missed. And it's also, I think, for some of the big dates like second deposit date, things like that, that those should go in your schedule. So you get a reminder, okay, a couple of days ahead of time that a due date is occurring and that you need to remind your buyer to be able to make the deposit, second deposit, or return a document, that you have that well in advance of when it's due, so you don't miss anything. You don't put your buyer into a potential default situation. Okay, it's 2:51. Is there anything anybody would like to discuss or bring up, or is there anything we talked about today that you'd like to go into further detail with?
No, not for me, Jeff. That was great as always. And just thank you very much, sir.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you, Jeff.
my pleasure. I'm glad that I hope I was able to provide you with some value. And again, remember, Broker Jeff only works on the days that end in Y. So call me or if you have any questions, and I'm here to try to help you be successful. Have a great day, everybody. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you. Hey,
Bye.
Jeff. Broker Jeff,
Thank you. Yes.
can you hear me?
Yep.
Hey, I just sent you an email. You brought up a question for me. So we went under contract. It looks like it's probably technically Saturday, even though yesterday we did some extra initialing. No HOA documents.
Initials dated.
I did it through DocuSign. Therein, they did it by pen. So I think DocuSign, does it add a date or does that count? They didn't date it personally.
You have to put a date signed with the initial. If you use DocuSign, or when they wrote it, they would have had to put an initial there. If it's an initial but no date, it still reverts back to the last date in the contract.
Okay, so
So-
then that would be Saturday.
Things were initial on Sunday but not dated. The effective date is going to go back to Saturday.
Okay, and then should I reach out to the listing agent? No HOA docs were attached to this listing in the MLS. There's nothing that's come my way. Should I reach out to the HOA or to the listing agent to get those?
So we put an HOA disclosure in, did we not?
We did. Yep.
Okay, so if the HOA disclosure is signed by all parties, no condo docs are required.
Okay. Okay.
No
Excellent.
condo docs are required. If the buyer wants them, you can surely call and get them, but they don't have a 3-day right of rescission.
Okay. Great. That's you can ignore my email then. Excellent. Thank you. This was
Cool.
a really informative Zoom
Great.
call.
I'm glad you're able to join us. Enjoy
Yeah,
your
thank
day.
you.
See
You too.
Bye-bye.